to a 2016 writ petition filed before the Apex Court seeking action against Uttar Pradesh's Samajwadi Party leader Azam Khan. He made a statement on the Bulandshahr rape incident, terming it a political conspiracy and nothing else.
देखिए, इस पर सरकार को भी, क्योंकि हम भी सरकार हैं, इस तरह से भी संज्ञान लेना चाहिए कि कहीं कोई विपक्षी विचारधारा और सरकार को बदनाम करने के लिए ऐसे लोग जो सत्ता में आना चाहते हो, वो तो ये कुकर्म नहीं कर रहे हैं।
The Supreme Court constituted a 5-judge bench who ruled that statements made by a minister related to government or its affairs cannot be vicariously attributed to the government. But in a separate judgment, Justice B.V. Nagaratna held that while freedom of speech and expression is a much-needed right, so that citizens are well-informed and educated on governance, it cannot turn into hate speech. Justice Nagaratna asserted that every citizen is under a constitutional obligation to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women and to strive towards excellence. The landmark judgment by the Supreme Court is an important milestone in the debate around hate speech. But the powerful dissent of Justice B.V. Nagaratna will echo for times to come. Should ministers not be held accountable for their statements, especially if they make it in official capacity? The last has not been said yet. Can laws curb hate speech? Should Netas be held accountable?
Well, that's the greater question. While there is limited legal accountability and the Supreme Court cannot create new restrictions, but there is indeed a need for greater accountability in public discourse when it comes to the issue of hate speech. All judges on the bench recognize that this is a matter which is very, very serious, and any kind of dereliction of duty or any kind of bad statements from the mantris, netas, especially the lawmakers, can have a bad impact on India's democratic culture. Taking this question to our guests as well who are joining us on the broadcast. For now, I have Alok Srivastav, who is an advocate with us on the broadcast. Amik Jamei from the Samajwadi Party is also joining us on the broadcast. Amik ji, I'm coming to you first. It was an emotional appeal before the court. I remember it was Justice Deepak Mishra who was in the court when this matter was referred to a constitution bench. And a woman and her 14-year-old daughter told the Supreme Court that the statements of Azam Khan have outraged the modesty of the rape victims who were fighting for justice. While it's a constitution position clarified that no further restrictions can be created, there is a bigger question. Should political parties ensure greater accountability when it comes to hate speech? Mr. Jamei.
चलिए, अगर हम मान लें कि माननीय आजम खान साहब के मामले में जो शिकायतें थीं
जी, उस
पे जो है हाई कोर्ट ने कार्रवाई करी और वो आज सदन के सदस्य नहीं हैं, लेकिन क्या हम ये उम्मीद करते हैं कि जो माननीय आजम खान साहब के साथ उनकी मेंबरशिप को ख़त्म किया गया, उनको बार किया गया चुनाव लड़ने से, क्या इस देश में जो प्रधानमंत्री के जो प्यारे लोग हैं, उनके नज़दीकी लोग हैं, क्या आपको याद है कि यूनियन मिनिस्टर अनुराग ठाकुर ने क्या कहा था? गोली मारो डैश डैश। आपको याद है? वो यूनियन मिनिस्टर था तब, अभी भी है। ये जो दिल्ली के प्रवेश वर्मा हैं, मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट, माइनॉरिटीज के बारे में एक बहुत बड़े मजमे में अभी दिल्ली में हालिया में उन्होंने क्या कहा था? उन सभी मामलों में कंप्लेंट्स हुई, लेकिन आज तक दिल्ली पुलिस की हैसियत नहीं है, उसके अंदर ताकत नहीं है कि जो कार्रवाई हमारी उत्तर प्रदेश की पुलिस ने करी माननीय आजम खान साहब पे, कि उसको अनुराग ठाकुर को एक नोटिस भी जाती। तो सवाल ये है कि क्या जो कानून है, जो नजीर है, वो समाजवादी पार्टी के लिए एक है, बीजेपी के लिए अलग है? क्या अगर वो शहंशाह की पार्टी से?
अमीक साहब, मेरा सवाल आपसे ये है, और मैंने शो की शुरुआत में भी कहा कि सभी राजनीतिक दलों से जवाब मांगा जाना चाहिए। मैंने बीजेपी, समाजवादी पार्टी का नाम नहीं लिया। आपके साथ मैंने पूरा डिस्कशन शुरू इसलिए किया क्योंकि आजम खान का ही स्टेटमेंट था जिसकी वजह से सुप्रीम कोर्ट की संविधान पीठ ने ये 5 सवाल बनाए थे और आज उनका जवाब दिया है, इसलिए आपसे सवाल पूछा गया। आपने बीजेपी के बारे में बहुत सारी चीजें कही। हम बीजेपी के एक सेकंड बीजेपी के नेताओं से भी मैं ये सवाल पूछूंगी, पर मैं आपके पास वापस आती हूँ। आई हैव अदर गेस्ट एज वेल, अपराजिता सारंगी, आदिल सिंह बोपराई एंड मिस्टर Subhash Jha, who's a constitutional expert and lawyer, joining us on the broadcast. Welcome to all of you on the show. अमीक जी, आपके पास वापस आऊंगी. जहां तक आजम खान का स्टेटमेंट था, मैं आपसे एक राजनीतिक दल के लिहाज से पूछ रही हूं. क्या आपका राजनीतिक दल जवाबदारी लेता है उस मंत्री के पूरे स्टेटमेंट के लिए? क्योंकि सुप्रीम कोर्ट का कहना है कि आर्टिकल 19 में जो लिखा गया है, हम उसके आगे नहीं जा सकते और कहीं ना कहीं राजनीतिक दलों को जवाबदारी उठानी पड़ेगी, और उसी जवाबदारी की मैं आपसे बात कर रही हूं. अमीक जी.
अलग जी, मैं आपकी बात से पूर्णतः सहमत होते हुए बड़ी जिम्मेदारी से कि हमारे जो पूर्व चीफ मिनिस्टर रहे माननीय अखिलेश यादव जी, चाहे वो किसी रिलीजियस बायस की बात हो, जेंडर बायस की बात हो, 0% टॉलरेंस हमारी पार्टी के अंदर है कि इस तरह की किसी भी चीज को समाजवादी पार्टी ना कभी इंडोर्स करती थी, ना हम इंडोर्स करेंगे. हम ये कह रहे हैं कि माननीय आजम खान साहब ने जो कुछ कहा था उनके ऊपर कार्रवाई हुई. आज वो बाढ़ हैं चुनाव लड़ने से, लेकिन जो जिस देश के शहंशाह की जो पार्टी है, सिर्फ शहंशाह की पार्टी से साध्वी प्रज्ञा एमपी बन जाएगी और वो पूरे देश में कत्लेआम की धमकी देगी, और ये जो बीजेपी बैठी हुई है उसका पुलिस काम भी नहीं करेगा. शहंशाह की पार्टी एक अलग निजाम और कानून से है, और जो रीजनल पार्टीज हैं.
I'm coming to you. There are various questions which have been raised on BJP Netas. It's a very important and a landmark judgment that the Supreme Court has given today. And as a student of law, I read it in the capacity that there is limited that the constitutional courts can do when it comes to Article 19, 91, 19(2). The court says that if you want to frame any kind of special laws, the legislature should do it, and the political parties should ensure that they make their netas, MPs, MLAs and mantris more accountable. Various questions that Ameek Jamei has asked as far as BJP and their netas are concerned. Your response? There's also an allegation that the police is going soft on BJP netas who have allegedly made hate speech. Aparajita ji.
A very good evening. Yes, indeed, it's a landmark judgment. And I would definitely say that this is a very considered judgment. The Supreme Court has in its judgment very clearly stated that since there are adequate provisions in the Constitution under Article 19, Clause 2, I think there is no need to go beyond that. I think this is enough. But at the same time, I entirely agree with others and you too that there has to be self-imposed restrictions. I think this has also been brought out by some of the judges. And there has to be a code of conduct. And every party, every political party has to actually tell its people, whether it is Bharatiya Janata Party or the Congress or the Samajwadi Party. I would definitely like to mention that Samajwadi Party has been erring every time. It's better not to point fingers at others. Today is the time when we should look into within ourselves and see where we go wrong. In fact, the ministers, the MPs and MLAs are representatives of people in respective legislatures. So I think they are being looked upon by the people, and that is why they have to set an example. There has to be a code of conduct, unwritten code of conduct by the
that
political
particular
party.
Code of conduct, Aparajita ji, that you're talking about, does it exist within the BJP?
See, I would certainly say that ours is a very disciplined party. And whenever certain things happen, maybe the public doesn't know that we are told, I'm also a member of Parliament of the Lok Sabha. I should guard my speech. I'm accountable to the people. I should know as to how to behave. I should know that people are looking at me. And I'm an inspiration and I'm an example. And I know that my political party, the leaders of my party would definitely admonish me if I'd go wrong.
I think Aparajita ji, there has to be something more than admonishment when it comes to hate speech, because it's a very serious matter. All the judges have observed that. Adil, I don't think any political party in the country, including the BJP, Congress or the SP, can claim to be holier than thou when it comes to hate speech.
I think the most critical part, Anusha, is that speech must follow up with action. The Congress party has zero tolerance for hate speech or hate politics. But unfortunately in this country, fine journalists like you, honorable judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts and all right-thinking people lament rising hate speech. But let me tell you as a citizen of this country, the ruling dispensation is using hate speech and polarization as an electoral tool. And this is not going to end. You and I can continue to discuss this day in and day out. People can continue to file as many petitions as they want to. But the reality on the ground is that the BJP is harvesting electoral dividends from hate speech. This is the bitter reality. I'll just give you one illustration which stands out. As a lawyer and as a citizen, it stands out to me. There were two BJP spokespersons who made extremely inflammatory statements which constitute offenses under multiple provisions of the Indian Penal Code. And then there was a fact checker who reported that hate. The fact checker was arrested by the Delhi police. However, those two BJP spokespersons were not arrested. What does that demonstrate? There is differential application of law. Now, you may turn around and say, well, what are you doing about the Congress party? The Congress party's position is very clear. If there is hate speech, please take action regardless of political affiliation.
Well,
but again, when we come to the core of the issue, for the BJP, hate speech is an electoral tool. We are in the run-up to the 2024 elections. You will see more polarization.
A lot of leaders within the Congress party have been accused of making hate
Take
speeches,
action.
and they continue to be a part of the Congress party's campaign.
Take action. Take action. We are very clear, Anusha. Let me say this on your program. If any Congress party leader makes hate speech, take stern action. But is the BJP doing that?
All right, Aprajita, there is a repeated point that Samajwadi Party and the Congress Party is making, that when it comes to the law enforcement agencies, because it's your government of the day, the police goes soft on BJP netas and proper action is not taken. Respond to that.
Say it's far from the truth and it's ridiculous. I would definitely talk about my party. As I said, I reiterate, Bharatiya Janata Party is a highly disciplined party. And see, there are certain sections of the Indian Penal Code and there are sections in the Representation of People's Act 1951. In fact, if there is anything which should not be uttered by a legislature member, I think we need to actually complain against the person. Section 153A and 153B of the IPC.
Amit ji, मैं आपके पास आ रही हूँ.
295A of the IPC, 505(1) and
अपराजिता, आपके लिए एक सवाल है जो समाजवादी पार्टी से आ रहा है, उसको सुन लीजिए और उसका जवाब दे दीजिए. अमीक जी बोलिए.
सारंगी साहिबा, बतौर महिला आप जवाब दीजिए कि साध्वी प्रज्ञा कुशवाहा ने जो बयान भोपाल में दिया, क्या आपकी पार्टी उनके ऊपर, कोर्ट तो छोड़िए, पुलिस छोड़िए, आपकी पार्टी क्या कार्रवाई करने जा रही है? सिर्फ बतौर महिला आज आप ये बता दीजिए.
अच्छा,
पूरे देश
को आपने अपना सवाल पूछ लिया. अपराजिता, आप अपना जवाब दीजिए. देन आदिल, I'll come to you one at a time. अपराजिता जी, प्लीज गो अहेड.
पर आपको जवाब देना चाहूंगी, आपकी भाषा में, हमारी भाषा में, हिंदी में जवाब दूंगी. आपको ऐसा क्यों लगता है कि हमारी पार्टी की तरफ से कार्यवाही नहीं की जाती है? जिनकी तरफ से इस तरह की बातचीत होती है, उन्हें निश्चित तौर पर उनसे कैफियत मांगी जाती है और जो भी कार्यवाही हमारे संविधान के अनुसार होना चाहिए वो होती है. पिछले दिनों हमने सस्पेंशन भी किए हैं. तो ये कह देना जो बाहर से दिखता है वो ऐसा नहीं है कि पार्टी की बातें बाहर आएंगी. We don't wash our dirty linen in public. That's the difference between our party and the other parties. We are a highly disciplined party. And if, there are aberrations, these people are definitely told by our leaders not to do that. Okay. And there are other ways also of admonishing.
I also want to bring in Alak Alok Srivastava and Subhash Jha into the discussion. Alak Alok Srivastava, coming to you. In this matter, and I think in many other matters that come before the Supreme Court, I believe there is very limited that the courts can do when it comes to hate speech. It is about having better laws in the statute books. It's about having better implementation of the hate speech laws. To expect a Supreme Court Constitution bench to frame new guidelines or to frame new exceptions under Article 19(2) is indeed an overstretch. The court couldn't have done anything else, and there's a very powerful dissent coming in from Justice B.V. Nagaratna. Alak.
Yes. See, at the outset, I would like to tell you that I go more with the dissenting judgment pronounced by Honorable Justice Nagaratna today. The Honorable Constitution Bench, the majority judgment says that no further restriction can be imposed on MPs or MLAs under beyond the scope of Article 19(2). However, Justice Nagaratna has really raised a very important point that when there is an offence which is committed by a remark by a political person, then government is also responsible, and there the ambit of Article 19(2) is required to be enlarged. This is a Constitution Bench judgment. I believe that in future definitely it will be reviewed and the citizens' relief or right must be given. Now kindly see the genesis of this case.
Yeah.
A person who holds a ministerial post in the previous UP government makes a comment against a rape victim saying that it is just a conspiracy, which is utterly disgusting and which is detrimental to the honor and dignity of the rape victim. The rape victim approaches Honorable Supreme Court, says that please stop him, because as a citizen of India, I have my rights to live a decent life and glorified and dignified life. Now he is infringing upon that. Supreme Court ultimately framed 4 questions. The Attorney General of India assisted Supreme Court in this regard, and the core question was that can MPs, MLAs be held accountable beyond 19.2 or not? And today the answer came that no, it can't be.
They cannot be.
Now my point is only this: as a concerned citizen of India and also as a lawyer, I believe that existing provisions of Article 19.2, obviously there are provisions like decency, morality, or incitement to an offence. These are the 3 ingredients of Article 19.2 which can be definitely invoked under the given parameters of the Article 19.2, but some broader explanation is definitely needed considering the consequences or dangerous consequences nowadays this 19.1a or the freedom under 19.1a is leading
and I
to.
also think that
Like
the entire
if we talk
definition
about
of hate speech is a heavily debated territory. Adil, you have a point to make there. Please go ahead.
Anusha, this is a pointless discussion when you have a party whose core is hate politics and polarization. I'm sorry, I'm repeating this again and again, but this is the reality. The Supreme Court had rendered guidelines in Tehseen Poonawala's case. Are those guidelines being followed? Please understand, I'm saying this at the cost of repetition. For the BJP, hate is an electoral strategy.
And you're also saying,
Politics
Adil, in
and
the same vein,
polarization
you're a
is the
lawyer. You're a
reason-
lawyer, so I'm asking this question to you. That if a particular political party and your political opponents are adopting hate as a policy, do you have no recourse in law to take them perhaps to the books or approach the courts or file a complaint? Are you saying there is no recourse in law and you're only going to be a bystander?
अनुषा,
Is that what
कंप्लेंट
you're
के
going to
बाद
say?
कुछ भी
Of course we
एक्शन
do
नहीं
that.
होता,
Of course
यही
we
बात
do
तो मैं
that.
कह रहा हूँ.
Of course we do that. But the problem is not that. The problem is differential application of law. At the end of the day, the police is under the thumb of the ruling party. I've given you an example. You arrest a fact checker, but you don't arrest 2 spokespersons who made inflammatory statements. How absurd is that?
All right. Before I
have
go
the
to Mr.
minister
Subhash Jha,
inciting
Aparajita, a
violence
quick
to get
response from
away.
you. There is a repeated allegation coming in that the authorities are cherry picking. They are not making an equal application of law. Yes, you have laws on the statute books when it comes to hate speech. There's a reading by the Supreme Court that has come in, but the powerful gets away. That's what is being accused.
So it has become a fashion to put a question mark on the action and intentions of the central government and the Bharatiya Janata Party. So I'm not surprised. The fact is that we are against hate speeches, and I would request you to recall the discussion that took place in the annual conference of state police chiefs and intelligence investigative agencies in December 2019. In fact, at that point of time, Honorable Prime Minister, who was present in the meeting, had sought an expansion of the definition of hate speech. And he said we should have the right kind of definition. It should be expanded. It cannot be tolerated. And then thereafter, the MHA
Aparajita, but a lot of times the question that has been raised is on the likes of Sadhvi Pragya. I asked a similar question to the SP spokesperson as well when it comes to Azam Khan. On Sadhvi Pragya, there is a repeated allegation which is coming in from the opposition parties. Respond to that, Aparajita.
See, there are sections in the Indian Penal Code. There are sections in the Representation of People Act 1951. Now, it's very clear by this judgment of the Supreme Court. If you have any problem, please go to the law, to the sections of this law, and take refuge there. And just to have this kind of feeling that the police will not extend support to you, this is not right.
Why do we have a police then?
Mr. Subhash Jha, you've been patiently listening to this discussion. I believe as a political observer and as a student of law that hate speech is a very contested territory. Depending on your political inclinations, depending on whose narrative suits, which statement suits whose narratives, political parties cherry pick and call one thing or the other as hate speech. And more importantly, because there is no definitive per se, the test which has been laid down and it has remained vague for a very long time, it has become an intensely political debate rather than, one about law and legal prosecution. Mr. Jha.
I tell you, this judgment could possibly create more problems than resolving the problem. The answer to that is as under. One, what is a hate speech has not been defined either under the Constitution or, for that matter, under any statute book. So, what is a hate speech? When do you draw a line? Now, this will be, please see, if we talk of India and the Constitution before that precedes our religious texts or our tradition, religion. And we used to have Shastrarth in earlier days. Shastrarth means having discussion, critical analysis of our own religion. So that is Shastrarth. And this is in tune with Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. Now, to say that any discussion on any religion is a hate speech is something with which we have to have critical analysis of every religion. Why only Hindu religion? Why not Christianity, and why not Islam? If there is something wrong with other religions, there must be, every citizen has a right to discuss. And then, without defining what is hate speech, it would possibly create, in my assessment, it would create more problems than resolving the problem.
Adil, the line about what exactly is hate speech is drawn based on where your political interests lie. I'm reading the 1984 anti-Sikh riot case, and there are leaders from the Congress party who were booked for hate speech. Some of them have not been convicted so far, but they continue to be the leaders within your own party. Why don't you talk about the Congress on this particular aspect?
Anusha, I said this earlier, let me repeat it again. If any Congress leader makes any hate speech, please take action. This is part number one. Part number two, you have ruling ministers, you have senior leaders of the ruling party inciting violence. Forget hate speech for a moment.
But no, Adil, you made this point earlier. You made this point earlier.
They are inciting violence.
One second. Your party was in power for a very long time in this country at the union level and at the various state levels. So when you argue that when it comes to the 1984 riots case and how different convictions have not been secured and how these people continue to be within your party, somewhere I think you're arguing against your case, because your party could be held liable for not pursuing these cases with the same vigor, like you're accusing the BJP of going soft on their own netas. Adil.
That's not correct. That's not correct. When you talk about the 1984 riots, it was most unfortunate. We are very clear, and the guilty must be brought to justice. The cases are pending before the courts. There have been some convictions. Some leaders indeed have been convicted. Let the law take its course. But today we are having this debate in a certain context. And the context is the Supreme Court order. There is incitement to violence. There is brazen, open incitement to violence. There are BJP leaders asking people
Anusha,
to keep arms and weapons.
To point out something.
What action has been taken?
All right. Alok Srivastava, a quick point from you, then I'll go to Aprajita Sarangi.
Just 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Just 30 seconds, because I could not conclude what is the further course of, what is the consequence of this judgment of Honorable Supreme Court. 30 seconds I'll take. See,
sure.
Hate speech, we all know, has dangerous consequences. We have seen how Kanhaiya Lal was beheaded, how Umesh Kolhe was murdered, and all those mob lynchings which are taking place. So definitely hate speech is something which has to be taken up very, very seriously. After today's judgment, the Honorable Supreme Court of India has shifted this entire thing, or the ball is now in the court of the Government of India or the state governments. They have to take care. There has to be certain self-imposed restrictions considering the dangerous consequences of hate speech. And ultimately, from Supreme Court, now the issue has come to the purview of the People's Court. If you see the language of Article 19(2), it empowers the state governments to make laws pertaining to certain parameters, certain headings. If you go to those parameters, you'll find that there is enough scope with the Government of India or the state governments to make strict laws to completely prohibit and punish those people who indulge into these hate speeches, because these are actually going on to
Alok, if netas
weakening
are
our
the
country.
Who are the guilty ones when it comes to hate speech, and allegedly they are using hate speech for their own political benefits, isn't it too much to expect from them that they are going to frame laws and implement it against themselves? That's the point that I want to raise. Mr. Subhash Jha,
You have seen
Mr.
exactly.
Subhash Jha,
I'll respond to this for 10 seconds.
All right, go ahead.
The minister who had made these remarks was removed by the people. So People's Court is the highest court. It is beyond the Supreme Court also. If a neta is not even making a law on this subject and brazenly violating and making hate speeches, then People's Court will definitely supersede.
Well, people's courts sometimes can be a tricky subject because that's what we have seen. If you can use hate speech for political advantage,
In this case itself,
then
Mr. Azam Khan was
clearly
removed.
electorate
In this
in
case
many ways
itself,
can
the
be
government to
manipulated.
which Mr. Azam Khan
That's
was
the argument
belonging,
which is being made. Aparajita
I
Sarangi, a
agree.
quick response from you, and then I'll go to Amik Jameel.
Azam Khan was
One
removed by
second.
the persons, by the public.
Aparajita, please go ahead.
We were all listening to the Congress spokesperson. I think he has been contradicting himself every time he speaks. In 1984, his Netas had actually made hate speeches and many of them were not brought to book. Now, he actually tried to evade the question that you raised. Now, as far as this particular issue is concerned, this judgment is concerned, good judgment. And I think we all need to be very responsible ourselves. And there has to be an unwritten code of conduct in each government, in each political party. And there have to be self-imposed restrictions. I think that's the only way out. And as has been said, I entirely agree. People will show you the way out. In fact, people are the best, I would say the deciders of
ma'am,
fate.
the Supreme Court
So
thinks that the
ultimately,
government
this is
should
the way
come out.
out.
The government should come out and frame a special law. Other 30 seconds to you, then I have to go to other guests as well.
If the BJP
There are
has
penal
its way,
provisions in the
if the
IPC
BJP,
and in the Representation of People's Act
very
1951.
well, we've heard
We can always
platitudes
take
before.
recourse to law.
We've heard platitudes before. If the BJP has its way, they will recommend and nominate Anurag Thakur and Pragya Thakur for the Nobel Peace Prize. If the BJP has its
Should
way.
I also try
So
to
I think the
list out
time
the
for
people
platitude
who
and
are
speed
there
is
in your
over.
party, who were guilty but who were
I'm
actually
sure
not
you
guilty,
I'm
but
sure you
it's
want
very
to
easy
nominate
for me to
Anurag
list out
Thakur
all those
All I
names.
can
Nobel
say
Peace
is that
Prize.
when it
Will
comes
you?
to hate speech, as I said earlier, no political party can claim to be holier than thou. Mr. Jameel, you had a point to make. Please make your point, then I want to bring in Mr. Subhash Shah.
देखिए अनुष्का, मैं फिर से दोबारा कह रहा हूं कि वो सभी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज, चाहे वो माइनॉरिटीज से लेकर कोई स्टेटमेंट हो, महिलाओं के प्रति, SC ST कम्युनिटी के प्रति, सभी लोगों को मोस्ट सेंसिटिव होकर बात करना चाहिए।
बट सर,
हमने कहा
आजम
कि
खान
चलिए,
तो समाजवादी पार्टी में बने रहे ना, सुप्रीम कोर्ट के दखल के बाद भी आजम खान तो समाजवादी पार्टी में रहे।
मैं आपसे कह रहा हूं कि जनता ने उनको सजा दी, सरकार के साथ मिलकर, सरकार ने मदद करी उसमें। हम ये कह रहे हैं कि जो बीजेपी RSS, इसका तो फ्यूल है हेट कैंपेन अगेंस्ट माइनॉरिटीज, अगेंस्ट SC, अगेंस्ट वुमेन।
सवाल बहुत
तो
सिंपल
ये
है,
जो
कांग्रेस
तीनों
के लिए
इनके
मैं
मैंने
कांग्रेस से
नाम
सवाल
बताए,
पूछ सकती हूँ।
नहीं,
आपसे मैं समाजवादी पार्टी का सवाल
जी
पूछ
नहीं
रही हूँ।
बताएगी
आपका
कि
जवाब मैं
प्रवेश
इस बात
वर्मा,
पे जानती थी
प्रवेश
कि
वर्मा,
आपने
साध्वी
आजम खान के
प्रज्ञा,
खिलाफ क्या किया था।
अनुराग
ये अगर
ठाकुर,
नाम लेना शुरू कर रहे
इनके
हैं तो
ऊपर
मैं भी
क्या
नाम लेना शुरू
कार्रवाई हुई?
करती हूँ, जैसे भी
All right, I have last 30 seconds, Mr. Subhash Shah. When it comes to hate speech,
नहीं, आप
it
कुछ
depends,
नहीं करेंगी,
it depends,
क्योंकि
it depends
प्राइम
on the
मिनिस्टर का
political
आशीर्वाद है
narrative,
आपके
and it depends
hate
what
speech के
kind of
नेताओं के
speech
ऊपर।
really does suit you, that becomes
आप
hate
आशीर्वाद
speech.
देते हैं।
Mr. Jha.
I'm sorry, I didn't get.
Mr. Subhash Jha, I was arguing that when it comes to hate speech, there are clear political lines drawn, and political parties cherry pick in terms of what they call hate speech. There is no consistent standard. All right, I think there's a problem which is there with Mr. Subhash Jha, but I'm short of time. Mr. Aparajita Sarangi, Adil Singh Boparai, Amik Jamai, Alakalok Srivastav and Subhash Jha. Thank you everyone for joining us on the broadcast. It's a landmark judgment that has come from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has clearly said that hate speech is a huge issue. The dissent of Justice Nagaratna in the times to come will take forward this debate. There is a greater accountability which is needed from the political parties and perhaps from the people as well as to what kind of netas we choose and elect. With that, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching.
Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. A 20-year-old woman, sole breadwinner of her family, was hit and then dragged for over 10 kilometers by a car occupied by 5 men on New Year's night. Just the horror of the case has shocked the country, coming as it did as every one of us was wishing each other a happy new year. The fact that the victim was dragged under a car for over 10 kilometers on a night when Delhi is supposed to have some of its highest police presence on the road has angered many. But this case is as shocking as it is confounding. Now that it has become clear that the victim was not alone, that she was in fact accompanied by a female friend who fled the spot after the accident and did not do anything to alert the cops, has shocked many again. Just what happened? How did this unspeakable tragedy occur, and what was the role of all individuals at the spot, and what was the role that they played in it? This has now become a mystery even as the victim was cremated today and the police ruled out any sexual assault. The case, the police say, is one of an accident that had a horrible end for this girl. The accused had no intention to harm the girls, nor was there any contact between the accused and the victim in this case. But how did they not realize that they were dragging a body under their car for so long? And where was the police on New Year's night as the body was being dragged kilometer after kilometer? We will take those questions to our experts and guests in just a bit. First, here is what we can piece together as far as the CCTV of this night is concerned. At 1:17 a.m., you can see in this footage, Anjali, the victim, and her friend are actually seen arguing on the road. This is supposedly outside the hotel where they were that night. They have a little bit of a fisticuff and they go at each other a little bit. As this footage plays out, you will see that something is going wrong between the two. Maybe they're fighting over the keys of the vehicle itself. Then at 1:31 a.m., the two are seen leaving the location together. You can see that one of these women is taking the two-wheeler out. Now, roughly half an hour later, they are seen on the scooty in this narrow by lane. This seems to be a residential colony and the two are together.